Dr. Blythe, Mr. Applin, Mr. Reiner, members of the greater Space Coast community, thank you for the opportunity to speak with you today. When Dr. Blythe invited me to discuss our Constitution and the quickening decline...
Dr. Blythe.
Dr. Blythe. I'm sorry, I've only read it.
Hey, that's okay.
I just met him tonight. Okay.
Call me anything, just don't call me.
Thank you very much. When Dr. Blythe invited me to discuss our Constitution and the quickening decline of privileges that we enjoy as Americans, I knew I should shape this discussion by the focus of my prepared comments. I've said that our political leadership is morally broken. If you know me only by reputation, then that might sound pretty rich. So I'll explain my perspective. Government, law, and the Constitution. Where issues the moral authority for these things? The President and the Pope sought just recently, during their visit, to highlight how they're both opposed to moral relativism. Each says he believes in a moral absolute. The obvious question is whether or not they're talking about the same absolute. Moral relativism is the study of morality as a fluid and dynamic value system. It might be the only field that I personally really feel expert in discussing. Different people and peoples have different and sometimes even opposite moral codes or moralities. What's the justification for government? Some Christians like to cite Romans 13. But this letter from Paul to the heart of a pagan empire provides no justification for the law other than because I said so. The same reason the children enjoy hearing so much. I think that as adults we must do better than this when we speak to each other, if out of nothing more than a faint glimmer of respect. In 1215, the English forced King John to sign the Magna Carta. Aside from affirming the right to trial by jury, the king was forced to admit that the law binds him. 1689 brought the Bill of Rights, and the Settlement Act of 1701 followed. Together, these three documents form the basis of what is known to lawyers and historians as British common law. What's the justification for our government? Our Constitution and law, though based mostly on British common law, take neither the Magna Carta, the Bill of Rights, nor Romans 13 as their moral authority. In this country, only one document justified the moral decision to revolt and reform the government. That document is the one our ancestors signed on the 4th of July, 1776. The Constitution, which we're here to discuss today, wasn't ratified until 1789, in Delaware first. Does anybody here celebrate Delaware Day? In this country, we celebrate our Independence Day. The meat of the Declaration of Independence is the assertion of self-evident human truths. Many, but among them life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. These words are the moral justification for America. These words are the source of our morality, how we expect to treat with one another and how we expect to be treated. This election, I think you have to vote for leaders at every level who best understand this justification for government. In America, no other moral code may guide the relation of one adult to another, because in this country, neighbors are not constrained to believe the same things. Where the self-evident rights of two people disagree, government is the remedy. And that's the only time that government is the remedy here. All other government actions constitute undue, unnecessary, and illegal interference. So let me talk briefly about the abrogation of rights. Many of you may not agree with me that American athletes ought not compete at the Olympics coming up in Beijing. But I ask you now, as an American, to take a long look around the room full of mirrors. Let us discuss tonight our human rights record. I also believe athletes should not compete because of the human rights record of this country. There's plenty to complain about, so I'm going to keep it simple. Someone ordered the abuse that occurred in our overseas military prisons. Junior enlisted did not start torturing and abusing detainees on their initiative. aside from the question of what officers signed orders for dogs at military prisons, which is a telling little clue in and of itself, the smoking gun has made itself known. In meetings that took place in 2002, the, quote, Principals Committee of Cheney, Rumsfeld, Rice, Powell, Tenet, and Ashcroft authorized enhanced interrogation techniques, from waterboarding to the number of times a detainee could be slapped. Legally, a slap is a battery, and a battery is a felony. ABC broke that news 3 weeks ago. 2 days later, on the 11th of April, the president admitted that he was aware of the meeting and that he approved. You may have missed that story because it seems to have slipped most American media. But the rest of the world is very interested. Maybe you think you have a right to the truth. Maybe you think the First Amendment guarantees it. Maybe it'll occur to you that there are things happening here that you might want to become made aware of. Well-paid former military officers hawk war goods to their old subordinates. That's not news. Some of these retired officers go on TV as senior military analysts. They get paid for their time. But that's not news. But when these same officers are treated to neatly manicured trips to Iraq, Afghanistan, and Gitmo by the Bush administration, and then fed talking points to use on those analyst interviews, that is news. The New York Times broke that news 9 days ago. The story is, no nice words on TV, no soup for you. And tell no one, my friend, or you're banned. This is mind war. They put it all in one word. It's in the paper, mind war. That's what they're calling it. The named brainchild of a former Army general turned Fox News analyst named Paul Vallely. Since 2002, Americans get their fair and balanced news from government insiders pretending to be objective, but who have financial interest in not doing so. Bush and company are using Vallely's ideas to wage psychological war on us. Purpose-driven psychological war in a concerted fashion. The First Amendment guarantees the freedom of the press. That means the press doesn't have to tell you anything. I know that everyone is upset by what they see as the declining character and morality of our nation. Yet I do not see these as declining times, just changing ones. If we cling to what makes us American, we are invincible. So how do you fix it? Have you had enough yet? These are the questions that I've been asking. I know the answer to the first question. I can fix it. Whether or not I get a chance to fix it hinges largely on the second question. Have you had enough yet? If not, I caution you. You cannot delegate responsibility for this. As a United States citizen of voting age, you are ultimately responsible for the actions of your political leadership. Democracy also has a second edge. If our leadership has overstepped its authority, and I believe it has, then we have a duty to see to it that those responsible for this horrible mess have their feet held to fire. Regaining American respect abroad means binding our elected officials to our law. Or, hear me now, listen to me last week, and believe me sometime in the future, my friend. Someone in the world will try to hold all of our feet to their fire. You must elect leaders this year who renounce torture, admit that prisoners of the U.S. military have a human right to habeas corpus, and recognize the primacy of Jefferson's moral code. A code difficult to balance, but the only defendable game in town. Indecision at this critical time will put our grandchildren at far more risk than any of us would ever choose for ourselves. Yes, tonight I am in front of a choir. You came here, you made the effort. We must convince the rest of America to let go of their cowardice, of their use of the word terrorism. Because in this country, we are not terrified of anyone. Thank you for coming this evening, and I look forward to your questions.